Welcome back, everybody, to Frontlines of Faultlines with Mike Kelly. It's good to have you back with us again. And we've been pursuing conversations around national resilience and how that affects our broader security posture. And to continue that conversation in this episode, I'll be talking with Justin Howden. It's really great to have Justin with us. Justin's a principal at Corporate Affairs Advocacy and Advisory, and he's basically someone who assists companies who have a real interest in achieving sustainability goals and employing sustainable technology. And so he facilitates strategic action plans around that sustainable development objective for these companies. But he's also a director of a new peak body called Microalgae Australia. And that's particularly relevant to the conversation we're going to have today around our energy security issues relating to oil, and what that really is all about. And we'll unpack a lot of the dimensions to that. So, we're going to hear a lot of fantastic information from Justin around some of the solutions to this energy security issue. But just to set the scene, let's kind of rehearse exactly where we're at the present time. And the security dimensions to this challenge, I think we should really understand properly. And from my perspective, as someone who served in strategy group in defence as the lead on the Middle East desk, there are a lot of dimensions to this that just go back to the raw factor of all of the resources that are poured into international terrorist organisations coming from that liquid capital in pardon the pun, but of petrodollars. And I was able to track when I was running the Middle East desk that in a space of only a few years, there'd been something like $7 billion pour into our region alone to fund radical madrasas and terrorist groups like Jamar Islamiyah, but also coming into Australia to really influence, and shape the sorts of things that were going on in our tertiary sector. And just to underline that even more now, it's emerged in the United States that Qatar has poured something like $100 billion into the United States over the last 10 years to shape their tertiary sector. And in congressional testimony just recently, it seems they've branched out too and looking to influence years K to 12 in the United States. So this is a matter of some concern. But beyond that, the physical security elements of not only the terrorist organisations internationally, but also some of the most heinous regimes on the planet. And so this oil resource tends to underpin not only the establishment of brutal police state regimes, but also enables them to develop the weapons of terror, including weapons of mass destruction. And that is really the key thing that we're dealing with Iran at the moment. They've poured vast resources into trying to develop a nuclear capability and weaponize it to the extent that you would be able to equip intercontinental ballistic missiles and intermediate range ballistic missiles to, first and foremost, destroy the state of Israel, but secondly, to be able to gain even more leverage against the international community and promote a more globalized Islamist revolution. But also, now we've seen how Iran has developed its strategy over many years, decades, for at least 40 years, of how it uses the Strait of Hormuz in leveraging its foreign policy, which is all basically centered around threats of terror, security threats, and energy security threats. And now we can see that made real. And so from Australia's point of view, it's not only the physical threat that comes from organisations like the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps conducting activities in Australia and the way it's attempting to propagandise and poison the minds of our youth. It's also the fact that 90% of our refined oil resources come across vulnerable sea lanes. And of course, the vulnerability of the Strait of Hormuz has impacted on that. So it would be very easy to shut down that key 90% supply line through even threats and intimidation. We know that the commercial operations that are centred on this have deep concerns about the value of their assets, these large tankers, and also the insurance regimes around this are a key dynamic as well. So all you have to have is a couple of sea mines floating around in the Straits of Hormuz. And, companies and insurance companies are just unlikely to take the risk of trying to push through that. So that's the overall setting in terms of our vulnerability to tenuous oil supply. And the other dimension to it, of course, is the stuff's running out. So within 30 to 50 years, the commercially viable extraction of oil is going to really seriously diminish to the point where any other cheaper source will overtake it, but also it will completely run out at some point. So this is a finite resource, and so we have to plan. We have to plan for what we do around that. And one of the things that really annoys me is that we haven't had that kind of national will and over the horizon strategic thinking that enables that long-term planning. We are trapped by these 3-year election cycles. And one example I can offer as an alternative to that is the Swedish government, who were deeply concerned about their dependence on Russia for their oil supplies. And so in 2005, they established a commission on oil independence. And they've made a lot of progress since then, and includes the 95% transition of all their buses, trains and trams running on non-fossil energy, which is also assisting them in their net zero emissions target ambitions. But also they're planning to ban the sale of new gasoline fossil fuel-driven vehicles by 2030 and having a fossil-free transport sector by 2045. So they're very intentional, very deliberative. They've used lots of biodiesel, biofuel options in that process. And of course, a really vast uptake of electric vehicles in the passenger, the commuter market as well, with about 35% of all new car sales being electric. So the policy dynamic can actually assist in this. So it's important that politicians understand what the options are out there, and it'll be good to have Justin explain those. But in terms of the current crisis, one of the things that we have to understand as well is that we are currently operating around about 29 to 38 days of strategic reserve, whereas countries like Japan has about 230 days and Korea 110. So the government has made just recent announcements on its intentions about trying to secure our situation with about a $14 billion plan, including $7.5 billion for establishing a fuel and fertilizer security facility, and $3.2 billion in relation to a fuel security reserve of around 1 billion litres. So I'll talk about the reserve issue and exactly what that means because of Australia's consumption of biodiesel and how meaningful the quantities are in that context. And Justin can tease that out for us. He's done the research on that. But the plan that I was trying to pursue as Minister for Defence Materiel back in 2013 was to try and see if we could accelerate and use the strategic weight of defence to move us into the biofuel world, noting, that long-term vulnerability that we faced. And so I was really pleased to be exploring technology that a company called Algae was pursuing with an experimental facility down in Nowra. And I took the Defence Science Technology Group people down there, and it was a really promising project. I'd seen this technology in Israel firstly, but that was based on a pond system, which was very vulnerable and required a lot of space. But what Algae was doing is they'd found a way to improve on that with a containerized system. And so the key issue there being that algae is very carbon hungry. And so this also gave us the option of, and the opportunity of reducing carbon in the atmosphere through this. So what they were going to do was do a pilot project with the Bayswater Power Station, one of our very large coal-fired power stations, 2 megawatt beast. And by strapping themselves to that power station, they could have eliminated 100% of the carbon emissions from that power station and greatly accelerated the growth of the algae and produced, millions of litres of this biodiesel, which would have been a straight drop-in fuel with no conversion or blending required. So that was incredibly promising because it would have also given us a nice, easy glide path out of the coal-fired power generation, given us the opportunity to develop all of the stability frequency regimes we needed to get to 100% renewables effectively without risk to the system, to the grid. So it was very promising. Unfortunately, it all fell apart because when the coalition were elected in 2013, they tore up the Clean Energy Future package, and so the commercial underpinning for that pilot project fell apart, and Algutech had to walk away from it and just go back to what they had been doing, which is producing feedstock for cattle. So that was very disappointing to me, and it's been something that I don't think has progressed particularly well since then. But that's why we've got Justin here today to really talk about what the potential is now with hopefully a better focus on the strategic vulnerability of Australia, but also what is the sort of practical path forward here. And when the government starts throwing around these vast sums of money like $14 billion, what would be a wise investment of some of that in relation to potentially getting us to a completely sustainable, renewable resource that enables us to sort of separate out, say, the passenger commuter vehicle space into electric vehicles and deal with all the heavier plant, industrial plant, the long haulers, ships, etc., that will still need a form of biodiesel or biofuel. So, Justin, thanks for being with us today with that background. And can you explain to me exactly what the consortia is that you're involved with and what the concept and plans are around that?
Yeah, thanks very much, Mike. Great context too, great scene setting. Microalgae Australia was formed at the end of last year. It's a classic peak body, literally set up to try and facilitate the uptake of technologies that are there already. It's not sort of looking for the next invention. Pardon me, I've got my wonderful Melbourne cold.
Yeah, all the good things come out of Melbourne, don't they?
Correct. It's not about invention. It's about commercialization and helping the people who are in the industry already fast track into solving some of the problems that you outlined, particularly that sovereign capability and resilience in biodiesel. And then secondly, also trying to advocate for the right policy settings to be able to get this done faster than just manana. So that's one of the key advocacy points from us as an industry body, is the key policy settings of supporting a nascent and emerging industry, but not one that is off on the never, never. This is today. This is technology that's around right now, proven, trialed, tested, can go into the biofuels, bioplastics, biodyes and bioingredients, and the animal food and feed sector. So all of that is algal based, and that's our broad universe of membership.
Mm-hmm. And does that include one of the vulnerabilities we've seen here is the story of fertilizer? And so does it offer potential in that respect as well?
It does. And one of the advantages in I keep saying bio, but biofertilizer is that it would be an organic fertilizer rather than the chemical inorganics. So again, and most people are sort of talking about complete substitution or switch. That's probably unrealistic in the short to medium term. This is a longer term play. So like the gas peaker plants in electricity that aren't on all the time, a lot of the work that we're talking about through biodiesel, whatever, is really to take the top off the peak as we move through to a greater uptake and distribution of the technology, which means that it can provide more into the diesel sector or the plastic sector. But right now, we're talking about getting things that can be made right now in Adelaide or Brisbane, technologies that actually work, and get them deployed and out onto the farms or the rural and regional towns, which have the probably greatest need for diesel in the shortest term.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what's the scale of the current problem in terms of how much diesel does Australia consume annually?
Yeah, great question. It's about 33 billion litres per year. So 33 billion is the headline stat. Agriculture and regional consumption, so that includes mining and resources, is a significant component of that, obviously. And one of the funny things is that we use diesel to transport diesel to as far away from where we're making the diesel as we can. So that has an emissions issue. It has using diesel to move diesel. So part of what the current Australian technologies are, as you said with your example, factory in a box, basically. So some of these equipment lines can go in a 20-foot container on the back of a truck. You're moving the equipment and the facility to where it needs to produce diesel, not moving the diesel.
Right. So, in terms of actually producing a biofuel option alternative to this 33 billion litre demand, what is the actual technology that we're talking about here? How do you create a biodiesel fuel out of materials available in Australia?
Yep. Well, I'll premise this with I am not a scientist nor an engineer,
Right.
but effectively you're looking at a grinder, which then, and I may get the term wrong, hydrolyzes what goes in and converts the sugars, starches, the feedstock coming out of generally, it all started with used cooking oil, but now it's moved into the seed oils much more widely, particularly canola. Converts the energy in those into a form which is a drop-in diesel. So I won't go through all the steps, but it's sort of like all the different steps going through from seeds being crushed, the seed oil coming out, it's converted, and drop-in diesel is the outcome. And that's why they fit in a shipping container. This is not massive or an enormous apparatus like some giant spray dryer or some massive refinery. These are small, I even say guerrilla style factory in a box. You could have on a small farm, you might have one. On a massive farm, a 10,000 hectare broad acre, you might have 20 or 30, making your entire diesel needs on site. Large regional towns, rural cities, there's no reason why they wouldn't have one. That's the conversion technology from seed, not the algal side that we'll talk about next.
Right, right. So there's basically quite an array of feedstocks you could apply to this, and a lot of that has basically a vegetable or crop source, doesn't it? So, you've got the renewable dimension to that, and because you can vary that in terms of this algae part of it that we'll talk about, would you not be then? How does that equate to threats to food security? Would you be trying to dominate too much of the landscape in producing the resource for this, or would you be able to get an effective balance with food security issues?
We believe there's a very strong balance point here. Australia is a massive canola producer and a massive canola exporter, a lot of which goes to EU to be used in biodiesel.
Really? Right. Okay.
So a small substitute for that with the amount that's going off to the EU can make a big difference to some of these early pioneering sites. And then as the technology gets diffused or taken up more around more places, more farmers would be growing seed oil. Every farm, as you know, has a dead spot or places that are fallow for a while. There's no reason why you wouldn't be doing that there one season over the other side of the farm the next season, and being able to ideally close some of that gap between what's needed and what you can produce yourself as a farmer. A rural town, some of the big rural towns have a lot of wastewater problems. So what's the best thing to do? You can't really process that into a human grade or a recycled grade.
Right.
So you're growing algal sources of inputs for the biodiesel production, or water into the canola or seed oil crops. That's normally the biggest problem for a lot of those rural cities.
Right. So effectively, you'd be giving farmers the opportunity to diversify, in fact, which would help them with balancing, the ups and downs of markets and other respects. So the obvious issue there would be there'd be this constant demand for the biodiesel input and feedstock, and so that would never diminish. You would always have that demand there.
And every year, more and more. So as we know, the farm base here in Australia has got fantastic export targets.
Right.
Hitting 100 billion of exports in a few years. We're, I think, about 80 at the moment. So there's more and more demand for more and more agricultural activity and produce and output. So that needs more diesel, firstly. And like we said earlier, if this can take the peak off and some of the stress out of the system, that would be a great start in biodiesel and the fertilizer side of things.
Right. So then we come to the algae aspect of that. And what I saw with these two projects, the technology that was started in Israel and refined by the algae tech. Effectively, you can take any source of carbon at all, you'll just grow the carbon naturally, the algae naturally from natural sources of carbon in the atmosphere, etc. So, what has been the progress on science around that, or at least the methods of commercially exploiting algae?
Again, a great question. A lot of it is well-known technology. Sometimes one of the best innovations is actually find out what's working really well somewhere else and bring it where it's not already there.
Right.
And there's an element of that in this. So the EU is quite advanced in a lot of these technologies. A lot of the major players in the supply chain or the equipment manufacturer, etc., are the big European suppliers. There is a strong capability here in Australia to do that as well. So it doesn't have to be imported. It could be made here and engineered, etc., and installed here, not imported, but using some of the learnings or technologies from the current inventions and innovations.
Right.
Ultimately, as you said, algae is pretty simple. It wants light, heat, carbon, and water.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't need to be good water, again, so it's not competing for arable land or farmland. It'll take wastewater, brackish water, high salinity, low salinity, whatever water's around, you'll find that there's an algae that will grow in it.
Right.
And a lot of the work and there is a library held by the CSIRO of about 17,000 Australian strains of microalgae. So there's a monumental body of work going on as to which ones grow where, what, under what conditions, which ones grow with the least amount of external resources needed. So it's much more productive and much better cost effectiveness. All of that's underway at the moment, which is great. I think I just checked before I came on, there's 10 different universities doing about 30 different projects in this space right now.
Right.
Not sort of, like I said before, off in the never. This is today. And the deployability is probably in the window of between now and 18 months.
Right. And so you've seen that algae bloom off the coast of South Australia. So obviously it's okay in salt water.
Yeah.
So, and of course we've got plenty of heat and sun. So
Definitely.
there's a couple of key ingredients there that are easy. And I think that was with algae tech. That was why they were sort of on the coast, and looking at Bayswater, because they wouldn't have threatened freshwater supplies. Not that you need a hell of a lot of water to do this anyway, but
And it's also not wasting the water. Like it's not fully closed loop, but it is quite renewable and regenerative. Every batch needs more and more billions of liters of water. Once you've got it, it's a bit like a swimming pool. Once you've got it, you just keep topping it up and make sure it stays clean and fresh.
Right. Okay. So
It's a terrible analogy, but
yeah, right. Whatever it takes to keep the algae happy, basically.
correct. Yeah.
And growing. So it's not necessary to have strapped them to coal-fired power stations. They can grow off any mix of that carbon source, even in the atmosphere.
Absolute logic to do it at a power station where you've got heat and water already. But a lot of places don't have power stations where they will need diesel.
Yep, right. So the interesting thing about this too is we've seen, one of our refineries at the same time as this crisis is happening have a fire.
Yep.
So, oh dear.
Law of averages.
Yeah. And only two, refineries left, one in Brisbane, one in Geelong. And also we've seen Iran conducting its attacks on facilities in every neighbouring country, basically, and also even other infrastructures that are related to this. So what you would be looking for, hoping to have, in a country that was concerned about these kind of vulnerabilities, to have a plan for a distributed energy system. And we've seen Israel actually rapidly sort of surge to that kind of structure, because of the threats to even its grid, so using renewable energy across distributed systems and decentralizing its energy systems and making it easier to, repair and restore one particular node that goes down at any time from a strike. And it's interesting too that the whole of the Snowy Hydro scheme originally was done under the Defence Act. It was seen as a security project, which was contemplated and begun at the end of World War II, and so that the the federal Labor government at the time was using its security powers, its defence powers, to actually do that project. And of course, one of the benefits of it is it's underground largely,
Yeah.
so it's less vulnerable. But one of the beauties of a system like this would be, as you've kind of alluded to, is that the massively distributed nature of it
Yeah.
and the removal of we talk about food miles, but the transport miles
Yeah.
on burning off a lot of diesel to move diesel. You'd think that would be something you'd zero in on straight away as like, well, that's just, a silly part of the economic equation here. And so you would have the ability, and we've seen our rural and regional communities really suffering the most from the current crisis because of it was the diesel price that went up the most, was the hardest to get hold of, the biggest disruption to supply, but it also affected their fertilizer and other issues. So that's obviously a nice kind of vector to have a distributed system like this that also meets those rural and regional needs and reduces costs for them in terms of having a localized source.
Yeah, absolutely. The opportunity for the regional cities and rural towns, for large enterprises across agriculture, resources, for making their own on site effectively. But ultimately, if this model got through and we only looked at diesel for agricultural users, you're probably taking 1% of total emissions out of the equation because you're not using diesel to ship the diesel everywhere. So
Right.
there's immediate down payment in a sustainability point of view, road usage, all the rest of it. There's significant benefits in that area, but nothing beats self-determination for the farmers, the feedlotters, the big businesses in mining and resources, and the rural and regional towns. They actually have control over what they need. Do they run it flat out all the time? Maybe. Maybe they don't. Maybe it's a peaking thing, but ultimately they've got control. And I don't know if you remember the Suez Canal incident where the boat blocked up the Suez Canal. Things go wrong too. This is not just geopolitics. Things just go wrong.
Yep.
That boat had stuck in there for probably another week or 2 weeks. Who knows what would have happened with our supply lines here with not just what's on that boat, but what's queued up behind that boat coming through the canal.
Yeah.
We do import a lot of different ingredients, plastic, chemical enablers. If that stuff backs up, we need an onshore resource to fill the gap.
Yeah. And some of the proposals I've seen for eliminating the Straits of Hormuz as a lever for Iran is building a canal across the UAE territory and the cost of that, because there is a mountain range that's sort of in the middle of that. It would cost about $200 billion to do. But also, all you would have to do, to your point, is to sink, one ship in that canal, and, job done. And so you're not beyond the reach of the intermediate range ballistic missiles, etc., drones from Iran. Even if you remove the strait itself at the moment, anything within their range, along those lines. So then you start talking about pipelines, and they're cheaper to build, but they also don't carry the volume.
Sure.
And then you would have to spend a lot of money on port infrastructure, etc., and some alternatives that are currently being used too now as a pipeline through to the Red Sea. Mm-hmm. And of course, then we've had the Iranian proxy, the Houthis, making that a problematic solution as well. So, again, we come back to ensuring that that we're not vulnerable to even those accidents of ships, breaking down and blocking supply chains. It just doesn't make any sense to live with that kind of level of vulnerability when we know that the answers are there. So when we talk about that climate change element as well, and trying to get to net zero, as our electricity sector continues to transition, the percentage of contribution to our emissions through this transport sector increases. So now it's roughly, I think, around 27% of our emissions comes from the transport sector. But there's another dimension to that as well, which is the health side of it. So effectively, the estimate is that there's roughly maybe around 11,000 Australians who die every year from the effects of the toxicity of the emissions from the transport sector in various forms. And I know my own brother's been battling with leukemia from having worked at a service station for a long time. So, and I used to deal with victims of that kind of exposure through benzene, toluene, those types of chemicals generating leukemia. So we could do ourselves a big favour just on the cost to our health budget of getting off these supplies and helping to meet our zero emissions target. So I guess that sets the scene for the problems that it could address. The next question would be economically how we get there and what that would look like, and sort of a broader discussion around that and the potential benefits to the economy. So, Justin, I think we'll finish our conversation there for this episode, and we'll come back and talk about those more broader issues around the economic dimensions, cost dimensions, and the potential benefits. But so thanks for talking with us on this episode, and look forward to resuming the conversation in the next episode.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the chat. Cheers.
All right, thanks for being with us, everyone. I'm hoping you're finding this interesting, because I think it's affecting every one of us at the Bowser. So join us again for the next episode, where we'll unpack this a bit more and look at sort of what the cost elements are that might flow through to the rest of your lives and the economy. So see you again next time. Cheers.